of Tactics and Tentacles in a couple weeks. I took last week off because of the Amazon boycott, and I don't cross picket lines. And as you may or may not know, Twitch is owned by Amazon. I am the Drungeon Master, the internet's favorite mildly inebriated game master for 12 years running. I've won every year in that particular category. And this episode, we're going to talk about how this role playing party here connects to Napoleon's activities in France and a horrible concept known as the fatal funnel. So I will set the stage and then I'll discuss a few concepts with you guys, and then then I'll walk everybody through it. So, set the stage. This is the underground exploration part of the Age of Worms adventure, The Champion's Belt. And for those of you who may or may not remember, Age of Worms is an old Dungeons & Dragons adventure path published in Dungeon Magazine in around '05. It was a 12 scenario sequence. Champion's Belt is Section 5. In this one, our heroes have formed a gladiatorial party, and as part of the gladiatorial games they're taking part in order to develop further information about an ongoing threat, they find themselves underground beneath the arena in an area which is basically a underground gladiatorial Olympic village. So as part of that, they decided they're going to go exploring and see what else they can find to generate some clues, figure out what's going on with the big bad evil guy, etc. So they had found a secret passage which led them to here. Come through, they'd fought 3 spawn of Kyos, which are some tougher than average zombie-like creatures. And that went well for them. They'd only burned out a couple of spells, so were pretty high in hit points, so they decided they're going to press on. They entered into this room here. There was another group of undead spawn of Kyos spread liberally around, as well as this Moreg, who is another type of undead, and their things started to go south. So before we get into how things went south for them, we'll talk about some concepts. The first thing we want to talk about is defeat in detail. Now, I'm going to use Napoleon for this. Now, I should preface this by saying I am not an expert on the Napoleonic era. If I have any particular claim to expertise in military history, it's World War I and the period immediately before and immediately after. Thanks to Professor John Samita at the University of Maryland, he did jam into my head a nodding familiarity with the Napoleonic Wars and some of the broader concepts, and I will go into some of those now in order to help set the stage here. So, it's become fashionable, I don't know, maybe the past 20, 30 years or so, to kind of poo-poo Napoleon. Oh, he wasn't that brilliant. He didn't do, he wasn't that successful commander. He was more lucky than good. He was good at the tactical level, but couldn't function beyond that. I say to all of you, wrong. Again, I'm not a Napoleon expert, but I'm bright enough to realize that this guy was thinking across all 3 levels of war, the tactical, the operational, and the strategic, simultaneously, and was using tactical effects via the operational means to achieve strategic outcomes, which is a really fancy way of saying he successfully used battles to win campaigns which achieved national level goals. And he did this while simultaneously running a country, revamping their tax code, their general code of laws, and conquering most of Europe. So yeah, he was pretty sharp. One of the things Napoleon was known for, in particular, was tempo. Now, I've talked about tempo on this show before, and my particular definition of it, which is tempo is not just moving faster than the enemy, it means imposing the pace of events on the enemy. Tempo leads to initiative, which means you're dictating events to the enemy. Well, Napoleon was a past master at that. he was incredibly good at moving faster, thinking faster, reacting faster, and thus dictating um, the pace of events. I would note though that everything I just said about Napoleon there was faster, faster, faster. Tempo doesn't necessarily have to be speed, and that's one thing I've tried to get across here. Tempo is about dictating the pace of events to your advantage. It's not necessarily about speed. It's just that in Napoleon's case, he often used speed as the element of tempo, as an element of tempo to his best advantage. One way Napoleon would do that would be through advantageous positioning. He liked to fight from the central position. And by that I mean he liked to have an enemy over here. Wait a minute. An enemy over here and an enemy over here get between them. Which, on the surface, to the uninitiated, would seem to be a bad thing. But he would do so in such a way that, through his use of tempo, he may have enemies on both sides or multiple sides. He would attack them where they were weak in sequence. And I don't mean literally in sequence. He would identify weak points. He would attack there in detail. And before the enemy could react or adjust, he would then move to another location and attack them there. And he would exploit this from the central position by the use of interior lines. Interior lines, I think for the next episode I'll have a slide just on interior lines to explain this. It's not a concept which, it actually is a concept that would be very helpful for the tabletop role-playing gamer. In essence, it's relying on the fact that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and that if your enemy has to shuffle around a perimeter while you're on the inside, well, then you've got a shorter distance to move. Shorter distances generally mean faster, which means that, again, you are dictating the pace of events on the enemy. So Napoleon would continually maneuver to a position where he was in between opposing forces. He also would exploit strategic alliances of his opponents, namely recognizing that various countries, and the one I'm going to talk about here is Western Europe in 1814, the 6 Days Campaign. Various countries would field national armies, which would coordinate but weren't necessarily under the same command. So rather than operating as a unified whole, they would operate as two separate elements that were working more or less in conjunction. Let me put it in another way. If you got 100 guys and you're fighting an army of 150 guys, you got trouble. If you're fighting two separate armies of 75 guys and you're able to attack them one at a time, well, things aren't quite so bad now, are they? And that's what I mean by defeating in detail. So here in the, it's kind of hard to see this map. In fact, it's even kind of hard for me to see this map. Boy, let me blow this up just a little bit so it's a little easier to see. That did no good whatsoever. Let me try again. All right, that's a little easier to see. Let me actually give it just a little bit of a nudge, a little more of a nudge here. That way it'll be easier for you guys to see and easier for me to talk to. So in 1814, Napoleon was once again fighting a coalition of European foes, right? And this was the War of the Sixth Coalition of Europe to form against him. You had a couple corps coming in from the German states. You had the Silesian army under von Blücher of Prussia coming in from east to west, and you had Schwarzenberg, who, as I recall, was the Russian commander. And they're all trying to maneuver to isolate and control Napoleon. That was not going to happen. So You can see here that Napoleon, with 100,000 people, is in the center. And he's got von Blucher with 108 coming at him from one direction. Schwarzenberg with 150,000. Actually notes that Schwarzenberg's commanding the Bohemian army, but I think that was still Russia at the time. And another couple corps coming around. Napoleon is in the center. Here's a slightly larger map. And this is the what happens at the 6 Days War. 6 Days campaign, rather. So Napoleon is well and truly surrounded. Blue is the French forces. Red are the forces of the Sixth Coalition. So Napoleon identifies a weak spot here at Champrourbet on the 10th of February. Guy named Ossaviv. Napoleon attacks there, routs him. He retreats. Napoleon, with 100,000, is isolating and attacking individual components of von Blücher's Northern Army. I'm really proud of how I say von Blücher. It took me a long time to get there. The next day, he attacks again. Napoleon attacks again at Montmirail. And then he attacks he wins there. And then he goes to Vauchamp, where he wins again. And this takes place, I want to say there are 5 battles total in the 6 Days campaign. Boom, 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 boom. Napoleon attacks segments of von Blücher and Schwarzenberg's forces rather than the whole element. He doesn't give them an opportunity to concentrate. He moves between them, attacks and routes elements of it. He's defeating them in detail. So, how does that relate back to what happened with the party? And what the hell is this fatal funnel garbage? All right. So let's talk about the fatal funnel, and then we will start tying it all together. So the fatal funnel, oops, I need to back that off because that's way too big. That didn't work. There we go. Okay, so the fatal funnel is a close quarters battle concept. In essence, that while you are transitioning through a doorway while conducting close quarters battle in a urban environment, you are at greater risk. It's a choke point. The enemy usually has good clear fields of fire. You do not. You're coming into a strange environment. You're not sure what's going on. And if you hesitate in the door, several things happen. One, the guys behind you can't do anything. They're stuck, and they're probably not going to shoot around you. You are standing there in a natural target, a doorway. You lack freedom of maneuver, while your opponent, which is probably strewn all over the room, has freedom of maneuver. So if your first or second guys freeze up in the door or just stop there and try to fight from the doorway, that really blocks up everybody behind them. And they're not going to be able to bring any combat power to bear. Which means the guys in the room are only dealing with a small portion of your force, while you're dealing with their entire force in the room. So they're able to defeat you in detail. So, let's take this over to the adventure now and talk about what happened in this next fight. So, this room here had a bunch of Spanakios, as I said. They've got this Morag here, which is ugly. And our heroes are strung out along this 5-foot wide corridor behind a door. Well, they go in, they open the door, it was unlocked. The player playing Stavros, who is a half-drow arcane archer / fighter, is a former combat soldier who knew exactly what to do, and he immediately moved up to this corner. Now, and took what we would call a dominant position in the room. Now, when I was taught to do CQB as a federal agent, I was taught you enter the room, you move forward, engaging any target, and then you peel off along the backs, and then turn around, and then, excuse me, then are going to dominate the room from the back corners while your partner goes the opposite way, and then the next guys flow in, etc. Six one way, half dozen the other. There's more than one way to skin this rat. However, he did the right thing. He took up a dominant position and was able to bring fire across the room. The next dude, Rogie Bloody Thumb, Ranger, stepped in the door and stopped. Whoops. Halflet Moon, who's known for his archery skills, I did allow Halflet to shoot over his head, but everybody who was behind him, including the emergency rescue party of our Eldritch, our Warlock, and our Paladin, who weren't originally there but joined us later, were unable to bring any combat power to bear. And now we got these guys with only two of their members actually in the room. One of them blocking the guy behind him, which, oh, by the way, provides partial cover, which is +4 to AC to the guys in front of him, namely the Spawn of Kios. And they're blocked from doing anything. Nobody can do anything to get into the room. Bernard the Bard's sitting here looking at everybody like they're dumb. Not Diamondback can't do anything. Halflet's trying to shoot arrows around him, even though he is, even though Rogie is providing cover for the people in front of him, or the undead in front of him. Bad show. Bad show all around. So when I set this up, I just distributed the Spawn of Kios liberally around the room, thinking that, okay, the most likely thing that's going to happen is they're just going to be wandering around aimlessly within the room without actually taking up positions until some sort of stimulus happens. Stimulus in this case, the party breaking into the door. So that immediately attracts them, right? The Morag was smart and took up a flanking position because it was the brighter one. But otherwise, they just kind of swarmed these guys. Now, both Stavros and Rogie they were 9th level characters. Notice I said were 9th level characters. And they, Stavros, who almost entirely fights with his bow, has whatever feat it is. This is 3.5/Pathfinder, so feats, to allow him to not attract an attack of opportunity if he's using his bow in melee combat. Rogie had switched to his, he was wielding a bastard sword in one hand and a war axe in the other because he's Rogie Bloody Thumb, and that makes perfect sense to him. And so we had a melee fighter, and we had a guy who was using a bow but still could function in a melee fight, and that was really all that was bringing power in here. Halflet was... Ooh, we've got 2 Rogie Bloody Thumbs on the map. Halflet was, as I said, trying to sling arrows over their head, and nobody else was. So here's where the randomness comes in. The dice rolls were not going the party's way. One thing that impacted Stavros immediately was he rolled a natural 1, and I ruled that was a fumble, rightfully so, and that he broke his bowstring. And thinking, okay, that would force him to transition to a alternate weapon system. Well, it turns out he didn't carry one. All he had was his bow. So instead of transitioning, going, oh crap, my bowstring broke, I need to grab my, Legolas style double daggers and start stabbing people. No, didn't go well for him. So he got beat up pretty badly there. One thing that did happen to him, and I was a little surprised by this, Spawn of Kios, when they attack, have an opportunity to transfer what's called the Gift of Kios, which is basically a disease-bearing worms. Every time they hit with one of their fists, they'll transfer a worm. It's bad juju, but it's something you can deal with. Restoration, remove curse, etc. We'll deal with it. Well, Stavros was after every round he got hit, he would deal with the worm first before he tried to do anything else, and that was really slowing down his combat output. Rogi was much the same way. So anyway, the two guys in front got the snot beat out of them because there were multiple undead creatures working them over really well. Again, they were being defeated in detail. Now, how would I have done this? If I were the players, I would have wanted to get as much of my power into the room as possible so that I couldn't be isolated and defeated in detail. Rogi should have moved forward immediately, allowing an opportunity for Nod to come in with his buffs and healing spells, Bernard the Bard to come in with his rapier and his rapier wit, and give Halflit clear shots. Halflit should have been over here. That way there would have been a nice crossfire going on. Nobody would have been able to, none of the undead would have been out of cover or would have been able to use cover against them. One of them would have had a clear shot no matter what. They would have torn these guys up. They did not do that. So, in summary for this particular episode, what you want to do is make sure you're getting the maximum, you're able to leverage the maximum amount of combat power against your opponents as you can. Don't stop in the door, move into the room. If you stop in the door, you're blocking everybody behind you. Now, there are circumstances where you may want to do that, but those are circumstances that you have to judge. Rogi, God bless his soul, he was trying to do the right thing, but Rogi's not very bright. I think he's got an intelligence of 8, so it never really occurred to him, hey, I need to get out of the way. Step aside, let Halflit come in here. If they had done that, they would not have expended so many spells and healing potions and etc. in this fight, and they would have been much better set up for what happened next, which we will go into next episode, when they fight this guy, Bozal Zahol, who has a special power which completely screwed them up royally. It was actually really fun when they realized what I was doing to them and how badly this was about to go for them. So, next episode we'll talk a little bit more about Napoleon, and I will explain some more about how he would ensure that he was able to maneuver so quickly and defeat his opponents in detail. And then we'll relate that back to the Age of Worms and the upcoming Total Party Kill. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Tactics and Tentacles. It's a short show, but I enjoy putting it on. And I will catch up with you guys next Monday. Remember that this Friday we are going to be broadcasting Gamma World on this channel at 7 p.m. Eastern, and I hope you watch that because it is hilarious. You can't go wrong watching Gamma World. So, thanks again, and may you always make sound tactical decisions, even if there's nothing really at stake other than a few pixels. I will talk to you later, and see you goodbye.